You ever wonder what happened to those brands that, used to be the world? The ones we thought were just invincible? Well, we're going to dive right into that. Because, trust me, the stories of how they fell apart are more than just history lessons. They are an absolute masterclass in what to do and, maybe more importantly, what not to do in business.
Right. That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, how does a company go from being a household name, a literal verb in some cases, to just a ghost, a memory? It's definitely not just bad luck. Turns out there are patterns here. These classic, predictable mistakes that you see happening again and again and again.
Just look at these logos. Do you remember them? For decades, these guys were absolute giants. Kodak, they were our memories. Nokia, they connected all of us. And Blockbuster basically owned Friday nights, right? They were just woven into the fabric of our lives. These weren't just companies, they were like cultural institutions.
And then, well, it felt like it happened overnight. They just stumbled. The logos we all knew and loved started to fade, to crack, to just disappear. And yeah, it was shocking to see them fall. But it wasn't random at all. So what really happened? Let's get into it and break it down, starting with the biggest, most common trap of them all.
Okay, first up, we have the great irony of being trapped by your own success. This is a classic. It's when a company's biggest moneymaker, their cash cow, literally becomes the anchor that pulls the entire ship down. Why? Because they're just too scared to build the next thing that might compete with it.
So let's start with Kodak. Man, this story is the very definition of irony. For 100 years, photography was Kodak. They completely dominated the market with that classic razor and blades model, They'd sell you the camera for cheap, but then they'd make an absolute fortune on the film you had to buy and all the photo printing. Brilliant, right? Okay, but here's where it gets absolutely wild. Just look at this timeline. Look at that massive gap. A Kodak engineer invented the very first digital camera all the way back in 1975. They invented the technology that would eventually put them out of business, almost 40 years before they actually went bankrupt. They literally saw the future, held it in their hands, and then they just buried it. Why on earth would they do that?
Well, it all comes down to this one simple, powerful idea: cannibalization fear. The top brass at Kodak was absolutely terrified that digital photography would completely wreck their super profitable film business. And you know what? They were right. It would have. But here's the kicker. By trying to protect their golden goose, they basically just held the door wide open for competitors to come in and eat their lunch, taking over the entire market.
And that brings us to the crucial lesson here, one that still echoes in every single boardroom today. You have to disrupt yourself before someone else does. It is always better to be the one to make your own product obsolete than to sit back and let a competitor do it for you. A lesson Kodak learned in the most painful way possible.
Okay, let's pivot to our next giant, and you'll see this theme start to build. I'm talking about Blockbuster. Their downfall wasn't just about ignoring new tech. It really boiled down to one single, mind-blowingly catastrophic decision. A decision that was just dripping with arrogance.
Get this, $50 million. That's it. In the year 2000, a tiny little startup, a DVD by mail service called Netflix, offered to sell themselves to Blockbuster for $50 million. And what did Blockbuster do? The executives literally laughed them out of the room. Laughed! Today, Netflix is worth, well, hundreds of billions. Talk about a complete and utter failure of foresight.
Wow. And look, their failure went way deeper than just that one terrible meeting. Their whole business model, their main profit driver, was built on something that every single customer hated with a passion: late fees, right? They were stuck with their expensive physical stores as the whole world was shifting online, and they looked at a clear competitor, Netflix, and didn't see a threat. They saw a niche little joke.
So this brings us to our second big theme here. Sometimes it's not that companies are afraid of new technology. It's that they just stop listening. They fall so in love with their own products, their own way of doing things, that they develop this massive blind spot to what their customers actually want.
A perfect example? Blackberry? They were obsessed with that physical keyboard, right? And their top-notch security? That's what made them the absolute favorite of big corporate IT departments. But they were completely blind to the fact that the entire market was shifting under their feet. People, including those business people, didn't want a glorified email machine anymore. They wanted a tiny, powerful computer in their pocket that could do everything. And Nokia made pretty much the same kind of mistake.
For years, they were the undisputed kings of hardware. I mean, their phones were indestructible. You could probably throw one off a building and it would be fine. But they got arrogant. They thought their brand name was enough to carry them. They just didn't get that the iPhone's magic wasn't just the phone itself, it was the App Store. The future wasn't about durable plastic, it was all about software and the ecosystem around it.
But it's not always about market shifts or some hot new technology. Sometimes the deadliest threat isn't outside the walls at all. Sometimes it comes from inside the company. The call is coming from inside the house, when the corporate culture itself just rots from within.
Take Enron. The collapse of Enron had absolutely nothing to do with a competitor or a missed tech trend. This was a story of pure, systemic, out-and-out fraud, a total breakdown of ethics and governance, starting right at the very top and poisoning everything.
So, how did they pull it off? Well, the scheme was incredibly complex, but the basic idea was actually pretty simple. They just created a bunch of fake shell companies to hide billions and billions of dollars in debt. At the same time, they were completely making up their profit numbers, just lying to everyone. It was a classic house of cards built on nothing but deception, and it fooled investors, regulators, even their own employees, until, inevitably, the whole thing just came crashing down.
And this kind of internal rot isn't always about breaking the law. Let's go back to Nokia for a second. Their failure in the market wasn't just because they underestimated Apple. A huge part of it was fueled by a broken, toxic internal culture that made it impossible for them to actually fight back effectively.
The company had just become slow, bloated, and bureaucratic. Instead of all hands on deck to fight off a huge new threat like the iPhone, different departments were actually fighting each other. And maybe worst of all, they had this shoot-the-messenger culture. Nobody dared to bring bad news up the chain to the bosses. And you just can't fix a problem if you refuse to even admit you have one.
Okay, so we've walked through this corporate graveyard. What are the big lessons here? What are the timeless takeaways that are still super relevant for any business, any leader, literally right now?
This really pulls it all together, doesn't it? From Kodak, we learn about that fear of cannibalization. The lesson being, you better disrupt yourself before someone else does. From Blockbuster, we see that rigid, asset-heavy model. A huge warning not to let your physical stuff blind you to the digital future. Blackberry teaches us about market arrogance, that the thing everyone loves about you today might be what holds you back tomorrow. And Nokia shows us how deadly internal silos can be. You have to be aligned as an organization to make big, fast moves. When you boil it all down, it comes back to these key ideas. You have to avoid complacency at all costs, because success makes you lazy. You have to embrace innovation, especially when it's scary. You've got to be obsessed with your customers, not with your own products. And above all else, you have to be ready to adapt, because the only thing you can count on is that things will change.
So, I'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. Think about the giants of today, the huge names in tech, in retail, in media, you name it, and ask yourself, which ones are making these exact same mistakes right now? Who's getting a little too comfortable? Who's stopped listening to their customers? Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that no giant is ever, ever too big to fall.